What's going on, guys? Your boy Mike here, and this is the first time in quite some time since I've come at you guys with a double upload. And whenever there's news on this channel, I will bring you the news. Whenever there isn't news, I'll try to drop some documentary style content on NFL history, which typically gets claimed by the NFL. But in this instance, we had news earlier today in regards to who the 49ers would potentially pick in the NFL draft. I discussed whether or not it's going to be a smokescreen, and that's the video we uploaded a couple of hours ago. But in this video, we're going to be discussing an additional trade rumor we have heard of and whether it's plausible or not. Really quickly, guys, I'm launching a huge Twitter campaign to get my Twitch account back. I used to do Madden simulations and football reactions on Twitch, and as a result of someone spam reporting me, I've been banned from Twitch ever since November for trying to launch a SWAT attack in the middle of a stream. Yeah, anyway, it got to a point where Twitch doesn't even respond to me, and the only way I could get my account back is if my great community, the Mike Mafia, goes in and retweets the tweet I leave in the description down below and maybe drops a favorite and replies to it with a hashtag free Mike. I'd really appreciate that, guys. I really just want to chill with you guys on a live stream. I can't really do it on YouTube because I already have a ton of YouTube channels, and YouTube doesn't favor my type of content algorithmically. In addition to that, if you could drop a like on this video to help this channel grow, that'd be greatly appreciated as well. Now that we got all that out of the way, break! Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? It's very weird to be an Atlanta Falcons fan because Matt Ryan is just 4 years removed from an MVP season. And as a matter of fact, his statistics haven't differed that greatly since that MVP season. Yes, 2019 was a gigantic step back when he threw 26 touchdowns to 14 interceptions, and this year he threw 26 touchdowns to 11 interceptions, but his head coach was fired in the middle of the year. Needless to say, you could do a lot worse than Matt Ryan, and in my opinion, he's at least a top 10 quarterback in the NFL this year. The tandem of him, Calvin Ridley, and Julio Jones have been more than enough to carry the Atlanta Falcons to offensive relevance. The problem has always been more so on the defensive side of the ball, and as a matter of fact, they've been so terrible defensively that the Atlanta Falcons have the number 4 pick in this year's NFL draft. And this is probably the worst year to be in the top 10 of the NFL draft if you're a franchise quarterback, because this is probably the first time we might ever see 5 quarterbacks go in the top 10 of this year's NFL draft. As a matter of fact, in very early mocks, we even had the Atlanta Falcons taking Trey Lance with the 4th overall pick. And I can imagine it being very difficult to pass on Justin Fields if he's available at the number 4 overall pick as well. As a matter of fact, trying to do a mock draft and trying to predict who the Atlanta Falcons are going to select at the number 4 pick has been very challenging, to say the least, because the player that fits their position of need the most in this situation would be an offensive player, which isn't really something they really need, and that would be Kyle Pitts. But at the same time, when you look at the track record of NFL tight ends that were selected in the first round, it doesn't seem that promising. So selecting Kyle Pitts at the number 4 overall pick just seems very uncomfortable in my opinion, even though he might potentially be a transcendent talent. You can't argue with what the track record has been for tight ends that were selected in the first round, and I don't even remember the last time a tight end was selected in the top 5. It also doesn't make a lot of sense to draft a quarterback when you could potentially prolong Matt Ryan's career if you build around him properly. After all, he's just 36 years old, and if it ain't broke, why fix the offense? I'll tell you where things get very sketchy. You see, the Atlanta Falcons have a disgusting cap hit. Like, their cap number is so obscenely high that they may struggle to potentially sign all of their draft picks this year, which is very troublesome considering how early their picks are going to be. And although the tandem of Julio Jones and Matt Ryan has been working offensively and has been producing good results when Julio Jones has been healthy, there are some rumors suggesting that Julio Jones might get traded right before the NFL draft. Now, it's really important to note that when the NFL draft comes around, there's going to be a lot of rumors like this going around. So instead of bringing it to you in a manner where I'm saying, hey, this is definitely going to happen and this is the news, we're going to go in and dissect the news and dissect draft whether this rumor is plausible or not. So let's get to the very first source and probably the most credible source on this, and that's Ian Rappaport. Earlier today, the Atlanta Falcons have received calls from teams inquiring about possible trades for all-pro wide receiver Julio Jones. A trade could not happen for cap reasons before June 1st, but teams know Atlanta's brutal cap situation and are calling. A deal won't happen right now, but maybe later. According to Albert Breer and Peter King via NFL Update on Twitter, the Falcons have been listening to trade offers for Julio Jones, and according to Schefter, in regards to Peter King's report from last night about Atlanta listening on offers to Julio Jones, the reason why it would be past June 1st is if they trade him after June 1st, they would save $15 million against the cap, but if they trade him before, it would be a $23 million cap hit. So I've made many videos on a potential Julio Jones trade, and there's never been a time that it's been more plausible than now, because at the number 4 overall spot, the Atlanta Falcons are in a very strange situation. This is probably the weakest defensive draft in terms of top tier defensive talent within the top 10 of the NFL draft. As a matter of fact, there's a decent chance that we go through the entire first 10 picks without a single defensive player being taken, which has never happened in the common draft era. Julio Jones has still been a monster. If you look at his statistics, the man has been averaging the same yards per reception average for the greater part of his career, obviously topping off at the 17 yards per reception average and going to the lower end at 15.1. But even this year, when he only played 9 games, he was still on track to still hit about 1,400 receiving yards at the very least. And despite being 31 years old, he's still a very productive wide receiver. The problem is Atlanta just simply can't afford to keep a star of this caliber on their roster if they're not contending at the very least. And when you consider the fact that they have the number 4 overall pick and they have the ability to potentially draft his successor, Jamar Chase, and pay him significantly less money and still have their potent offensive attack, then it makes a lot of sense for the Atlanta Falcons to trade Julio Jones. Now, you might be wondering who is probably the best team to go out and get Julio Jones. Well, the number 1 team that pops into my mind that I said earlier on, even before they acquired an additional draft pick, that makes a lot of sense to me would be the Baltimore Ravens. You see, the Ravens have successfully acquired an additional draft pick in the Orlando Brown trade, and I feel as though, if it's not too much of an overpay, giving up a late first round pick in return for Julio Jones, obviously you might want to throw some later round picks in there to even it out according to the Jimmy Johnson scale, then you have a win-win for both teams. The Baltimore Ravens get Lamar Jackson, a surefire number 1 wide receiver, which is a position that they've been desperately trying to upgrade for the last 2 years. The Atlanta Falcons get additional draft capital and maybe could finally target that defensive player at the end of the draft that they desperately need. Another team that could potentially go out and trade for Julio Jones would be the Green Bay Packers. But the problem with that is Julio Jones and Davante Adams are a very similar type of wide receiver, so I can't help but wonder whether that pairing would work. But needless to say, I would love to see Aaron Rodgers have both Davante Adams and Julio Jones in his wide receiver unit. That would be so exciting to watch as a football fan. Regardless, I see this as a very plausible trade situation because the Atlanta Falcons have no idea who they should take at the number 4 spot in the NFL draft. I personally wouldn't be comfortable selecting a tight end with the top 5 pick, even though he seems like a transcendent talent. And this would be a savvy move to get underneath the cap while also collecting an additional asset. So let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think? Do you think that this is another rumor that just isn't going to happen? Do you think the Atlanta Falcons should trade Julio Jones, or do you think they should keep him? Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.